We've been doing this 15 years and we've never not done more revenue than we did the year before, ever.
People that are scared to fail are also scared to grow. There's a lot of people out there that are wishing, dreaming, and praying that they got to do the things that we get to do every day.
If I could go back, I would have done that at 5 million in revenue. A lot of them make mistakes because I think that you got to find the organic ability to grow because nothing beats that.
I'm Mary Signorelli, and welcome to Manage to Succeed, where we interview MSPs who have managed to break the ceiling and become wildly successful, and hopefully share some tips and tricks with you guys.
My name is Shawn. I'm a CEO and co-founder of In-Telecom. I've been here for coming up on 15 years, I guess. Started this thing at a very young age and did not know that I would be in the MSP world when I started.
So I'm Jimmy Burns, COO and co-founder. So similar to Shawn and I are college roommates, high school buddies about senior year. Had aspirations, wanting to do something with our lives, and started a business and started something we thought was going to be just a little job that we had, and it's turned into a full service MSP. So
when we started this thing originally, In-Telecom was founded on saving people money on their cell phones and landline bills and doing telecom expense management. And so in 2009, when we started doing that, we had picked up some contracts with some local companies and kind of fell into doing what we're doing today. So it's kind of interesting to see how we evolved as an organization. We thought we were going to create this big company doing expense management and going around and saving all these people money on their, their cell phone bills and landline bills. And obviously that world changed quickly. My background was in the wireless industry. Jimmy worked at Verizon as well. And we had a client that wanted us to get quotes on a phone system. And we went out and got quotes on a phone system. And Jimmy asked me one day, what if we sold him the phone system? And that's kind of what started the technology side of what turned us into who we are today.
So that was the problem you were trying to solve.
that was the problem I was trying to solve, outside of the problem of convincing the client that he wanted to put his communication as his most important thing for a 3-location oil and gas company, that he wanted to put his faith and his trust in the two guys that knew nothing about phone systems, right? So I think overcoming the obstacle of how to put a phone system in was probably easier than convincing Mr. Brian Chasson that Jimmy and Shawn were the two right guys to do it.
So did you get the deal?
We did. We did.
What was the structure of that deal? Did you even have any idea what you wanted it to look like?
No, we didn't even really know how to make money on the deal. We just knew that there was an opportunity to make money. My background was in sales. Jimmy's background was in sales. So we sold it to him knowing that we would make something. No real structure on understanding margin or what needed to happen. We just knew that he had a problem and we could fix it. Yeah. And we knew if we fixed it, he would give us money.
Give us money, yep.
Okay, so question, because I'm thinking operationally, did you have a CRM or like?
No.
Oh, no. I remember.
I'm just thinking of like an MSP starting out.
We did.
Like
we did
you
have
sound.
A CRM. We did have a CRM. It was we would take a baseball binder that you put baseball cards in, the clear plastic, and we put our business cards in there, and that was our CRM. So we'd index a CRM on who we need to call currently, who we need to call in a month, who we need to call in 3 months, who we need to call later on, maybe longer in a year. So that was our CRM. So we had some form of a CRM, I guess you could call it.
I mean, we had QuickBooks.
Yeah.
So we knew how to invoice. In the first year in business, in 2009, when we started, we did $8,400 in top line revenue. In year 2, in 2010, we did $64,000 in top line revenue. So in 2 years, we didn't break $100,000. I think when I talk to a lot of these MSPs at conferences, they ask me that question all the time, is like, what got you to do what you had to do to get to where you needed to go? And it really was like fight or flight. Like there's a book out there called The Power of Broke. And I can tell you find creative ways to go get things done and find problems. And that's kind of what we did in those beginning stages of we kind of had to make it. So in 2011, my wife got pregnant and it was kind of like, all right, this is real. Like we got to make it work, and get out there and get after it. Jimmy and I were kind of attached at the hip in the beginning stages, and we sold together, we installed together, we serviced together. And then I think when we realized that we needed to segment what we were really good at, Jimmy was a lot better at the technical side and putting things and learning and I guess more mechanical. And I was better at the sales and prospecting side and networking. And that's kind of where when we divided and went out and I would go sell it and then he would install it is really when the company started to take strides.
How long from that first sale with Mr. Bryan to the point where you realized you needed to segment? And was it just the two of you, or when did you know you needed to hire someone?
Probably close to 2 years, year and a half after that, you know. We did that first deal. I remember we got like a $50,000 check and like I think there was like $6,000 profit. It's like, this is more money we made in 2 years, you know? So it was a revolutionizing moment. But I think at that point, we started realizing that we had something. It was probably maybe a year or year and a half after that where we said, hey, you know what? And it was probably because a lot of times we would go places together and we'd go run sales meetings after. And sometimes we couldn't figure out how to fix it. So I remember many times I'd tell Shawn, just leave me here and come get me after you finish the sales meeting, right?
And I would go run the appointment because at the time we were
everything.
You know, we were everything.
Yeah.
We were it.
You were the technicians, you were the sales, you were the
everybody.
CEO.
We taught ourselves how to start a telco company and install phone systems. Like we didn't know anything about structured cabling. I didn't know the tools or have the background in it. We literally watched YouTube videos and figured out how to create it, you know. And then it just evolved from there. We had sold a big deal to Associated Wholesale Grocers on a big cable structure job, and it was a 1 million square foot facility that we bid wrong and we won, and just had to trial by error and learn and cabled that facility. Taught ourselves how to terminate fiber, ran all the fiber in the building, did paging, did the whole 9 yards, and brought in some friends that needed jobs, and I guess they were our first employees.
Yeah.
And at what point in the business were your first employees?
2010, we hired Julie, came in and became like our office manager, biller, answer the phone, do everything.
Yeah.
You know, and we brought her in and she just kind of learned and figured it out. And then we brought on some more staff that we thought were techs but weren't techs. And we're just teaching them on our own on how to do the things. I think we hit a good stride when we brought James in. James started in 2012. So I would say that's probably when we realized that we needed to make an investment in some real employees that actually knew this. And we had put a job out on Better North Shore Jobs, and James walked in and we interviewed him and didn't really know how to interview. We were two, young guys. I think we were 26 at the time.
Yeah, but 26, 27, yeah.
With a dream and understanding of what we wanted to do. And we told him that we wanted to start a cloud-based voice company and build out some cloud infrastructure, not really knowing how to do that. And I remember asking him in the interview, like, man, you know how to do that? And he's like, yeah, well, he worked for a voice company at the time that was kind of getting evolved into that. And we had lost a deal in 2011 to Ring Central. And that's when Ring Central was just getting going. And I told Jimmy, I was like, if we could make these phone systems talk to each other and do 3-digit dialing across from them, could we not put an IP phone behind one of these routers and make it work? And we sold our first cloud deal to Dave Martin, Allstate Insurance. He's actually still a client today, and that was our first VoIP deal. It was like 7 or 8 phones we did at the time, and
that was a big deal.
Yeah, for us.
Yeah.
I think it was a bigger deal that it worked.
Yeah.
That it actually, we put it in and it worked. And then I remember trying to figure out how we're going to port these telephone numbers and like do 911 and all these different CNAMs and registrations. And we had got partnered with a company, AMPI, a good friend of ours, Ed Kane, worked at, and he helped us through it. And we just were very vulnerable and able to ask questions and get to the end result. I think that's what really got us to where we are today, even, is understanding that you're going to face problems and you have to find a way to fix them and keep moving, and get growth-oriented mindset. That's one of the biggest things I'll see with MSPs today where they fail is they want everything to be perfect, and we were far from perfect.
Yeah.
We were not good technicians at all, compared to what we have today. We have some incredible employees and engineers and people that can actually really do the work. Jimmy and I would probably take 7 hours to do a 1-hour task at the time.
Yeah.
But we never quit. And
Yeah.
I think that's the end result, is we never stopped. I laugh at that phone system we put in for NREC. and it took us weeks to get it working properly. And if I was to fast forward 3 years beyond that, and look what James could do, like we could have installed that in a day.
Yeah.
So it's funny to see the evolution of the company. It's kind of humbling to understand where you come from. Sometimes you forget, right?
Yeah.
Because you get caught up in the growth and all the things that are going on, and you just get focused. We never really had a business plan. We didn't really have goals. We just kind of knew we wanted to make money, and was trying to find every which way to do that. And then once we, started making some money, I never forget the year in 2011, we did about $274,000 in revenue, and it kind of felt real. That following year is when we did over 7 figures in revenue, and that's what really got us to that point. So that's where I think the major transition really happened, was when we thought, can we do $1 million in revenue? And we did it. And then once we did that million, it was kind of like, all right, well, can we do 2 million?
Let's do
Let's do
two.
2, yeah.
So Jimmy, when you think about that time before you hit the $1 million mark and interviewing team members and bringing people on, what do you think the biggest challenge was there?
Oh man, the biggest challenge was probably the inexperience of Shawn and I of knowing actually what we needed, right? I think a lot of times we had ideas what good looked like, really because we looked at how everyone else did things so poorly. And one of the biggest things, and it's still a core value today, is like the client experience. Shawn mentioned that we were never good techs, but we're always responsive. We always set expectations. We always set next steps, right? So at the end of the day, when you do those 3 things, you don't have to be the smartest, you don't have to be the best, right? Because clients care more about communication, expectation, knowing when things are going to get done, and knowing that you have somebody that actually truly cares about what's going on. So that was the hardest part of interviewing. It was like, how do we interview for that, right? And at that time, we really didn't know that was like our secret sauce, that it's the way we treat people, it's the way we communicate. We were very fast, we're very responsive, so trying to figure out how to interview for that specific characteristic was difficult, We got really lucky with James because, James, his motto still today is he cares about the client experience, almost to a fault, right? But at the end of the day, I think that was a huge challenge for us. I think the challenge of, knowing like how are we going to make payroll? We have these 1 or 2 guys working for us. Shawn and I don't have insurance, but we're paying for insurance for employees. We bought our first company car in 2012, and then we had to give it away. Like we were so proud to ride around with a Ford Transit, as terrible as and uncomfortable as they are. We were so proud to ride around in that car. I saw pictures of his daughter when we first got it, standing in the driveway on the steering wheel. But we were proud of that. And I think at the end of the day, we had those challenges that were coming our way. So, I think we were faced with challenges over and over again. But one of the things that we always kind of prided ourselves on was that, Shawn and I were always going to suffer to an extent, right? Because we knew that if we wanted to be more, we couldn't pay ourselves more than we were paying our employees, right? So up until about, probably 2018, maybe 2017, 2018, Shawn and Jimmy were the 2 lowest paid employees in the company. We were a $5-6 million company at that time. We were the lowest paid employees in the company. So
I think we're afraid, I know for me, I was afraid to ever go backwards.
Yeah.
And I just never forget trying to figure out at a young age, I didn't have any family members that owned businesses or anybody I could talk to. So it was I just didn't want to go back to being in the situation I was in before. Yeah. So the way I looked at it is I gotta spend less than I deposit. Yep. And if I spend less than I deposit, my dad always told me my whole life, make no deposits, get no withdrawals. Yeah. So I just always had this mindset of this fear mentality. And I had a person recently ask me, they said, do you think you're chasing success or running away from failure? And I think it's a reality of the fact that I know that I'm always running away from failure. That doesn't mean I'm afraid to fail, because we failed a lot, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that is where a lot of MSPs make mistakes, is they start making money and they get to this place where all right, I'm doing $1 to $2 million in revenue and I can pay myself $200,000 a year. We didn't do that. No. We realized that we needed to hire experts in the industry to do the work, because we knew that we were only going to be able to do so much work. It was never a lifestyle business for us. It still isn't today. Yeah. It's never been a lifestyle business. It's always been, we get a salary and we're employees just like everyone else, and we put our employee hat on and we do our job and we do our role. And when the company does good, we get paid the same. And when the company does bad, we get paid the same. Yeah. It it doesn't fluctuate.
Yeah.
It's never fluctuated. And I know a lot of people that I've talked to in this industry, I get it. You know, we were young. Honestly, I think what it really boils down to is we were young and dumb.
Yeah.
We just didn't know any better. We didn't know we could take on debt. We never knew about debt. Like I remember going to my banker, we were like an $8 million company, and I remember asking him, like, man, are we doing good? And he's like, yeah, you're doing good. Like, you're doing really good, you know? So we just, I guess it was kind of ignorance in a sense. And we never got focused on like how much money we're going to make. We always got focused on like how we're going to take care of the client and just grow. Like, I think that's where a lot of people fail. And I've made that same mistake in my career here, where I've held back and not pushed when I should have pushed. And I think a lot of people in this space, it's scary. Payroll's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
very
going,
uncomfortable. Like making those transitions, going from a 1 to 2 to a 3 to a 5 to a 5 to an 8 to an 8 to a 10. Right?
and how did you know when you needed to grow? Like, how did you know when
we
you
never-
needed to go 3 to 5?
We never stopped.
We never stopped.
Right, we never stopped.
We've been doing this 15 years, and we've never not done more revenue than we did the year before, ever.
Yeah, we've never stopped.
So I think it goes back to, in my mind, it's you can't not grow. Like at this point, like we've done it 15 years in a row. It's just been a normal thing. There's never been a year consistently that we have not done more revenue than we did the year before.
Yeah, we've always said if you're not growing, you're dying. You know, that was our mindset. That was our motto. Take care of the staff, take care of the team, take care of the clients. You know, they take care of the company.
And I think the industry has a message to all of these MSPs that they should be at 20% EBITDA, 25% EBITDA. And if you study business and you look at companies, it is very difficult to maintain a very high profitability and grow. So there's a ladder that you have to climb as you're doing it. And if you're afraid and you get so focused on, I'm not saying you can't be focused on bottom line. We've never not made money either, right? So I will say that. We've never went
we're always
a year.
profitable, yes.
We've always been profitable. But I think we've just, again, it was pure ignorance of we want to grow the business. And, you know, we didn't lay out a plan. We never planned on a year for growth until 2019. So we were in business for 10 years, and never once did we say, all right, here's our goal for next year.
Can you think back to that time? Because I'm thinking about MSPs who are watching this, and you know, they're thinking, "Oh gosh, look how easy it was for y'all."
It wasn't easy.
It's not easy.
What were some of those failures? What were some of those blockers that pure grit got you here?
Yes.
But what was something you tried that didn't work, or that some?
There's a bunch.
A lot. Yeah.
Can you think of anything specifically?
Oh Lord, we have. I mean, I think we fail regularly, right? We fail daily.
We still do.
We still, that old saying is, perfection is the enemy of progress. I think coincides a lot with failure. And I think that I think people that are scared to fail are also scared to grow, right? Because they get focused and like infatuated with like 20% EBITDA or 18% EBITDA, like getting to 20 and like, let me cut my bottom client whose EHR is, $98, so I could be charging them $150, right? So I think there's, as we've never been fearful of any of this stuff. Like we've always said, man, I've been broke before and I'll be broke again. Like it doesn't. Now it's different now, right? Because we have, close to 100 mouths here of committed team members that, breadwinners for families. This is their career. Some we have families working here, the spouse, the husband. Do we have any children of people? At one point we had children of people working here, So there's a lot of pressure today versus what there was, back in 2017, 2018 of like, all right, now we're a provider for these people. Now the rash decisions of not caring about, from a fear perspective. Now, we've got 100 people we got to consider in every decision that we make. So looking back of like fearful, a lot of people say, man, when you grow, it gets easier. It does not. It gets harder. The pressure gets bigger. The expectation gets harder. The weight on your back gets bigger because there's more people that are dependent upon every decision that you make. So, thinking back to 2017 and 2018, sometimes I'm like, man, I wish we'd go back to those days. I wish I could hop in the DeLorean, right, and jump back to those days and experience some of that. But, I think at every phase there's different problems. I think as the business gets bigger, the problems get bigger. Maybe some of the problems you dealt with when you were smaller, you're not dealing with those specific problems, but you know, the problems are always going to be there. I think selling the dream of you're going to grow and hit 10 million and 15, and like you're just going to, these problems are going to go away and you're just going to be an owner. I think you can get there if you want to be complacent and just level out. But if you want to grow and take on that fear every year, then it doesn't get easier. But that's part of the challenge, right? I think that's part of, like, we tell people all the time, we sit around and we're like, man, I think we're just kind of crazy, because I think we operate best when we're under pressure. I think we operate best when, like, we're invested. I think we operate best when we're challenged against something. And like when things are kosher, it's kind of like, it's uncomfortable. Like, you know, it's just an uncomfortable feeling for all of us, you know. So I think that's kind of part of our DNA of just how we've always.
I think that's where owners also make mistakes and try to get involved in every little thing. And I think we've also learned, like, we got to get out of certain aspects of things and let it flourish and let it be and kind of stay out of the way. Because of course, every owner can do it better than everyone else, right? So we think sometimes certain aspects of things, and we care more, and we should care more, because it's our, while it's on the line, right? And I think that's where a lot of people can get too involved in the business. But then you also got to make sure that you are involved in your business, right? You got to lead from the front. And I think that's one thing that we've done here. And I think the message I would give, and I've always given to every small MSP, and I meet so many of them that are great engineers and they have a great business going and they're at the $2 to $5 million mark and they just can't get it to grow. But they also don't want to make an investment in sales. Yeah. And they say that the reason they don't want to make an investment in sales is because they don't know sales and they don't want to get uncomfortable. But like, we didn't know servers.
Yeah.
You got out of James's way.
We did the opposite.
You hired James and let James do what he was great at.
We hired engineers and technicians, and people could say that may be easier, but is it? Like, if you can't challenge them, because the same message that I get back from other MSPs is, well, I don't know sales enough, so how do I manage and set expectations for a salesperson? And the advice that I always give them is, why would you not hire a CEO with a sales-focused background and get out of the way of your own business? And like, why do you need to be the CEO? If you look at business and anywhere, and if a CEO on a publicly traded company isn't showing profitability and growth, he probably gets let go.
Yeah.
So if you're not willing to step out of the way in your own business, and I even feel that same way here, that if I feel like I couldn't get the business to thrive and grow financially, and what we owe the people here, because they came here for that vision to see a bigger organization. And I think once you get it to show that and you get momentum, I think it just continues to grow and thrive, and you get people bought in that same vision and that same understanding and having that same growth mindset. And it's hard. Then you got to go from founder-led sales to a team of people selling to feed this monster and keep it fed, because it's hungry, you know, and it becomes a challenge, you know. And
I think sometimes, you know, people really don't understand what it takes to really go sell, right? I think a lot of times we get mixed up with all these programs and dial for dollars and marketing schemes, and we think if we go ride around and make 5 or 10 calls in a day, that at the end of the day we're going to see a return on that. I think that from a sales perspective, the commitment level of it, it's like being in the middle of an outage. To relate to an engineer, it's like being in the middle of an outage for 8 hours a day, right? That's your constant. It's grinding. It's calling.
Sense of
follow
urgency
up.
is
Sense of urgency.
Sales is hard. I've done all the jobs here, and I will tell you, sales is the hardest. And I think that a lot of people don't want to pick up the phone, and you get a lot of owners that make a lot of excuses and say that I'm not good at that. And it's like, well, what are you doing to get good at it? And if you're not trying and you're not applying yourself to it, how do you get better? You know, it's like swinging a golf club. I can say that I'm not good at golf, but if I never swing the club, I'm never going to get good at it. Yep. And I wasn't always, I've been good at sales for a long time, but I wasn't always. And I put a lot of effort into finding ways to get better at this, and perfecting it, and really understanding what true sales process is. It's like, if I could go back to like the 28-year-old Shawn, I would have probably been looking at how do I define my sales process, in a very structured manner. Because I never forget when a consultant told me one day, like, what's your sales process? And I was like, I don't know, I just pick up the phone and call people and talk to them. Like, there's no process. And like he like drilled me for weeks on asking me questions about what I did at this stage and what questions was I asking and how was I trying to understand it. And I think really for me, I've always been a curious person, and I just would get into somebody's business and I would get infatuated with how their company operated, and I would ask them questions on how you make money, what do you do, and like, you know, and I got super intrigued in technology, and it's awesome when you can watch technology create efficiencies in a business and actually have it make money for them, and it's just cool to see, you know. And I think that's some of the difference, and I think that's all you have to do. Like, it's not rocket science. If you truly care about the end result as a sales professional and what you want for that client to have and that experience, like, that's the results that, you know, that continue to create profitability. You know, we didn't get hung up in profitability and KPIs and metrics, and I never got caught up in what other people were doing, because if I look at what we've done compared to every other company that's out there, we did no marketing. We had no marketing budget. We've tried marketing, and Taylor does a great job here. But at the end of the day, I think there's a component of that benefits your business. But I think you just don't have to overthink it, and just get good at fixing problems. And it becomes different challenges, and you evolve as an individual over time. I think that the slow, I guess it feels slow. Again, we've been doing this 15 years, but the slow growth pace consistently year after year after year is what benefits, right? You know, the advice I would always give is don't be afraid to make that step, and you have to make steps of getting yourself into a very uncomfortable place and climb out of it. And if you in this space, I believe, especially in the MSP market, if you try to grow without the right staff, we've done that too, and that becomes even harder because you create this burden on your current staff that they can't keep up with the amount of work. And we've outkicked our coverage here a lot. Yeah. Several times.
How do you know that? How do you know when that happens?
Well, today we can look at utilization rate and understand that.
Yeah.
I think communicating with your staff, I think that's the main thing. I think if you just talk to them and understand where they are, pay attention to how much workload they have. I think we live in a world today where we got to watch that. You know, you can overutilize resources in this space and burn them out, and then they're not as efficient. So it's like pitching baseball, right? You can't take your star pitcher and have them pitch in all 9 innings. And you have to know that, and you have to be very creative on getting there. I think people that are in the ownership perspective can take steps back, I guess, in compensating themselves as much as they do and making investments into more people, and then getting them the resources and the things that they need. Because if you talk to your people, they'll typically tell you when they need help. Now, you got to be cautious with that too, because they'll always say, oh, I could use another help desk person. I could use this. I could use that.
I've heard a phrase, you don't necessarily throw people at a problem.
We've done that here too. And that doesn't fix it
at all,
Right.
Doesn't fix it. You know, what fixes it is understanding how to build processes, how to build standard operating procedures, and understanding what people do. I'll never forget, I had a guy tell me years ago, he said, you know why Coca-Cola is so successful? And I was like, why is that? He goes, because they take this big of an issue and they break it into small chunks, and they let people handle those individual small chunks. And I think what ends up happening to a lot of business owners, and we've been guilty of this time and time again, we probably still make this mistake, is we don't understand why they can't think like and see what we see from a bigger perspective. And I even look at some of the legacy employees here, and I see some of the frustrations that they get with new staff members coming in. And I try to explain, like, imagine when you first started, look how small we were and how much you had to digest. And if you look at it now and coming in, there's a lot. There's systems, and there's metrics, and there's clients, and there's all these things happening. And they're trying to grasp all of it at such a large scale, rather than some of the people that have been with us for so long. They get to digest that
over the years.
over the years.
Yep.
And they grew with it.
And they grew
Grew
with
with
it.
it, yes.
Yeah.
And it's just different. And I think that's where it's hard to recognize that. And you have to recognize that. And I think you have to be patient. I'm a very impatient person. So you have to be patient with people and let them evolve, communicate with them. I think openly communicating with people and letting them know where they're failing is what you have to do. And it's okay. Like, no one loves to have those difficult conversations, right? But I think being transparent with someone and explaining to them where they need to improve and what they need to improve on. And if I look at the individuals that we've communicated to in that way and looking at the change that it's created internally, it's been so much better. Find out what they love to do.
Yeah.
What do people love? You forget because you're growing up, right, to the business, and like you're doing everything. You're wearing so many hats, and you got to figure out what do you love to do? I think as owners, you have to figure out what do you love to, what do you enjoy doing? Like, if I could pick my job every day, it'd be selling.
Yeah.
I like to sell.
At what point did you say, we've got to document? We have to write down processes, because you bring on new people and they don't know what the heck is going on.
2021, maybe.
Yeah,
We were pretty big
Yeah.
when we did that.
So it was years.
We had a file server that we put documentation in that was labeled customer data, that had a name of a company and just a bunch of information in it. So we were putting information away. There was really no structure to that information and what was there. I think the bigger problem runs into standard operating procedures and the way the companies operate, because they're all different, and we're not vertically aligned. We're very horizontal when it comes to our customer base. And I will say the clients really drove us to where we are today, because they would have an issue and we would fix it. And then it was like, oh, that was cool. I wonder if that would work at this business over here. And they would implement that same process somewhere else, and even in a totally different vertical, and they were having the same problem. So you start realizing what that looks like, and then start building out different structure for other companies and helping them. I do think there's a play to be verticalized and servicing the same industry. I think the downside of that is what do you do if that industry takes a fall? And I've seen that, and it's killed companies. They get focused on oil and gas, and oil and gas is great, and then it's very volatile, and the next thing you know, it falls apart, and then their business falls apart. And we've never wanted to be in a scenario where we had to lay people off because we didn't have work.
Yeah.
So we've kind of just stayed pretty steady. Now, I will say a pivotal point for us was when we divisionalized into service, projects, and separating that. At one point, it was like a bunch of texts. It just, here's a work order, go do that. And one day you were doing projects, one day you're doing service. You never knew what you were going to be doing. And I will say, when we divisionalized the company, and that's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
Because now you have to make sure that you have enough pipeline from a sales perspective, continuously fill that project department and service it.
So when y'all made that decision, what did it look like for you two trying to decide who's going to be on what team, and do we have enough project work, or are they going to do project work and then fill in on service desk?
That's kind of what we did.
Yeah.
It was that, and then you realize it's your job to make sure you fill a WIP of revenue and keep it full. And you start learning that pivotal point, and you start recognizing, I will say this, I think where a changing point for us was when we brought on a CFO. So when we brought on a CFO that really truly understood the financial aspect, like Jimmy and I never realized the reason we were able to grow without having to take on debt or bring on private equity or anything is we had an engine of project revenue that was driving at a set margin that was funding the ability to continue to grow the MRR side. We didn't do that intentionally.
No.
Again, like I said, we were just ignorant to the fact, and we didn't know that you could take on debt. I didn't even know, we were an $8 million business, and if you would have asked me what private equity was at the time, I couldn't have told you what that meant. I'd have been like, I don't know. I don't know what that means. Does that mean they have equity in something? Yeah. I wouldn't have been able to tell you. And I think that we just continuously, now I will say it got really hard at the $8 million mark to break to, from 5 to 10 is tough.
Yeah.
Is really,
What was
really
so
hard.
tough about that?
But I know what it is. You break 35 employees, And when you break 35 employees and you hire the 36th employee, you can't manage it all.
Yeah.
And you can't touch it. And you can't control all these things that are happening and all these different components and pieces. So when you hire that 36th person and you got to start maintaining and managing that, and you're trying to manage it, I call it, at one point we call it the caterpillar approach. Yeah. It was like me and Jimmy and then like all these people.
Yeah. Like
just asking what to do and what next steps. And some people were making decisions, right? But you really didn't have any structure. And I think that's where people get stuck is they want it to be perfect. They're afraid to let things go, and they don't want to let them just thrive. And it gets hard and it gets difficult and it's stressful every single day. It's different level of stress, and you make the wrong hires and that costs a lot of money. You don't have a good onboarding program for your staff, so they fail. You don't set expectations properly, and it just turns into this whirlwind, and it gets super difficult to break through that. But once you do, and you get through it, and you recognize, and what was hard for us is we went from 8 million to like 10.5, and went from 10.5 to 16.5.
What were the time frames for those?
2 years.
Yeah.
2 years
Year
each?
apart each one.
No.
Each one's a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went from
10 to 16.
We went from 8 to 10, 10 to 16.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and then from 16 to 20.
And what was
20,
the catalyst from
almost
10 to 16?
I'm trying to remember that year. I think we brought on a couple large clients. There was a lot of, the economy was very stimulated, so a lot of companies were growing, we were capitalizing on the economy at that point, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of money in the market. I think technology COVID played a big part in that, and a lot of people leaned into technology, and we had the staff in order to service it and do it, and we weren't afraid to jump in and just go, and we just did it and just made it happen and never stopped. And we still do it today. We don't stop. I mean, it's a grind. It's grit. You got a lot of grit. And if you don't have grit and you can't deal with the long hours and the sleepless nights, and it's not for everybody. And I think that's why a lot of people stop and take some chips off the table and bring in, look, we've talked about it before. Do we bring in private equity to take some chips off the table and, and really push this thing and throw money at it? But we just also look at, we're doing it, and we haven't done it, so why? And we've met with a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And the value they bring to us at this point, I don't know.
We haven't hit that plateau.
No, we've never gotten there, and we're not afraid to push hard, and we're good at setting goals today on a quarterly basis. And when we focus on those goals quarterly and pick our head up at the end of the quarter and look at where it is, and do we need to make adjustments? And you can't be irrational, and things don't happen in a month. Things don't really happen in a quarter. They happen annually. And if you set the goal there and you stay at the target and you just keep pushing towards it, and you get everybody around you to push towards it, you can. I think the easy button is to get private equity. I think the easy button is to bring them in. And I'm not saying that they can't bring value to a business, because I've watched them also go into businesses and bring a lot of value and scale them very rapidly. But I've also watched them break things too. So you got to be very cautious on that,
Okay, so when we started the conversation and In-Telecom started, it was about phones. Walk us through having phones in your stack, or that was the problem you're solving. And then what problems did you add to that stack? What did you continue to innovate? What was the plan moving forward? And then from today, where are you going? How do you keep growing?
So what ended up happening was we started implementing our voice over IP product, ITC Cloud, and started getting involved in putting VoIP in businesses. Well, what we started to recognize was you had to control the network. So we didn't know at the time, the way our VoIP platform was built, we had to re-IP every network that we went into, because they had to use a different IP scheme than what they had originally, because no one in our environment, the way we did it, could have the same IP scheme. So, and a bad network would expose VoIP so fast, rather than just being on the internet, right? That's when you get that packet loss on a call. So I got tired of the finger pointing game because my thought process was if your phones don't work, you're not going to pay me. So we hired our first network engineer and we're fixing all these networks for free. Well, then we started to implement infrastructure as a service where we would apply switches and routers and access points on a monthly service. Well, and manage it for them. And we started to recognize how poorly the MSP market was servicing their client on the networking side. Well, the engineers we had hired came from MSPs. And they were like telling me and Jimmy, man, you ever thought about doing managed services? And I'm like, I have no clue how to write a managed service contract. Like, it's impossible, but we'll just keep doing what we're doing. And we just kept evolving and getting into that. And then one day I was at a client and they were showing me what they paid for their managed service contract. Man, I just fixed their network for those people. Like, I could do that, you know? And we figured we would get into that, I guess, industry and start doing managed services. Well, we were looking for a new RMM tool and getting off of what we were currently using and talking to Continuum. And we went to a conference in Pittsburgh and I met a guy by the name of Matt Lee, which a lot of people in the industry know Matt. And Matt told me that if that voice was becoming a commodity and we needed to evolve into a full managed service company. And I kind of took offense to it at first because I was like, man, I make a lot of money in this telco game. What are you talking about? I started to see the writing on the wall with the industry and how it is evolving, where there was so many, it was becoming a very crowded market in the VoIP space, and there were so many resellers and anybody could do it. It was almost becoming too easy.
Yeah.
So we started writing managed service contracts, and we had already had the help desk built out because we were already servicing our client base that way. We were already managing the metrics because we wanted to make sure we were delivering a good customer satisfaction and making sure that experience was always good. We already had a field staff that was out in the field servicing the client base and kind of evolved into managed services. And I will say that's when really the company started to take big strides that year when we got into doing that. Our monthly recurring revenue scaled rapidly. We got into selling contracts probably in 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
Originally, we started out where I'll never forget, I had a good friend of mine tell me, without monthly recurring revenue, your business will die. So in the telco space, it was all about move, add, change. So me and Jimmy came up with a plan that we would sell to all these voice customers where we would service them and do all their move, add, change for them, extension changes, password resets, whatever it may be, phone moves, phone name changes, and we would charge them $125 a month, unlimited, and you call whenever you want. And I never forget a buddy of mine in the telco space saying, $125 a month, man, you're gonna lose so much money. And I thought it was like, they're never gonna call me. And then within the first year of doing that, we got our recurring revenue up to about $35,000 a month. So it was just really interesting to watch. And then he was looking at me like, man, how are you doing that? I'm like, well, then it's like selling insurance. They're never all going to call on the same day. And then just kept evolving into that. And then it went from 30 to, I'd be curious. I've never really looked at it to see the growth trajectory. I know when it was at about 300,000, it went to about 660 in 1 year. So this was in 2018.
2018 or 19, yeah.
We scaled it like that, and then we did it again the next year, and then it just kept, again, once you start getting the momentum going and you know that you can go churn, you're going to have churn, right? Lose clients. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. We didn't have that for a long time, though. So I would say from 2015 to today is what it took to get the 1.2 in MRR, but you really had that big trajectory happen from 2019 to 2024 is when you really saw it like boom.
When did security come heavier into your stack? Because phones, networking, the maintenance. And
About 2.5 years ago, we started looking at, all right, we got to start looking at the landscape of cyber, and we got to get good at this. There's so much noise of like, oh, you can't be an MSP and an MSSP and blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of always ignored all that and realized like you got to start somewhere, and you're probably going to do it wrong at first. And you got to be vulnerable and ask questions and understand what is the right way to do it. And what does security awareness training look like? And how do you use it? It's one thing to sell security awareness training to somebody. It's another thing to take the product set and use the reporting as a tool to teach the business on the importance of that. And I think that's what's interesting as we started to evolve into offering the different packages we have today. It was really the demand of the client and looking at where were the vulnerabilities and what could go wrong. And we never wanted them to be out of business. We don't sell MSP, we sell business continuity, right?
Yes.
And we sell an ability to remain operational, because when you don't have that is when it really sucks, and it's very expensive, because that's when that sunk costs get into play. So I would say it was about 3 years ago we got into it. And it's funny because I look back in 2017, like we got ransomware. We did.
Yeah.
Not even knowing. Like we didn't know.
How'd you find out?
Well, I went to go click on some documents and they were locked. Yeah. And they told me I needed to go buy Bitcoin and pay it to get out. You know, we were doing a big cutover for a client in the telco space and made a bunch of CSRs we were going through, and all of a sudden I couldn't get to them. You know, and it was us learning from that and understanding like what caused that and what got us that. And it was us clicking on things that we should have been clicking on, you know, and then educating the staff and then pushing through it. And at the time, like we didn't even know, like that was when cybersecurity wasn't a hot market.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something that was really big, you know, and you look at where it is today, it's huge. And the risk it's all in the news and it's happening every single day, and people think that they can't get hacked. And you know, we have a lot of clients that'll ask us like, can you give us 100% protection? It's like, well, that would be like me going to the doctor and telling them, can you give me a guarantee I won't die? No, like it can happen. And it's about how can you find ways to prevent it, and what can you do to be cautious and walk that fine line. And I think as you get larger, that gets harder because it's educating your staff, it's having the right protections in play, it's having the right insurance and the right procedures and
The right communication.
yes.
Yeah.
It's you know, it has definitely been a big growth perspective from that. And that's kind of when you look at what happened in that space, that's where you really saw some trajectory start to happen on the MRR, was adopting a security practice and making that investment of some analysts, bringing on the right partners, because there's a lot of people in this space, you know, finding the right ones that are going to make an investment in you and help you grow, and then in a sense they get to grow. And that's what's cool about working with cool partners out there today, like we get to work with, and it's interesting to see that evolution of the business. I guess that's what put us on the map with MRR when you look back at it. Yeah, it was
It's
like
part of the growth. Yeah, that's about when safeguard compliance and all these different compliances started coming out, and it started being more public of what was happening, so that fear was there for clients, it was there for individuals. I think originally we rolled it out, we probably didn't price it exactly how it should have been, you know, so we probably sold a little bit more in the beginning than we should. But we once again, we learned.
But you learn, and you evolve from that. I think that's where a lot of MSPs make mistakes with adopting a security practice, is they say, oh, I can't adopt a security practice because it's not gonna be perfect and I may end up losing, and you may.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And I think as you evolve and learn, and it's okay to have that difficult conversation with your client. I think that's where a lot of MSPs make mistakes too, is they don't want to have that conversation with the client that they're not profitable from them. And like the P word is okay word to talk about. We need to be profitable. Mm-hmm. And I think if your client doesn't want you to be profitable, then why would you work with them anyway? And if you're not maintaining that level of relationship, and it gets very challenging in this space, and setting the right expectations on what you're going to deliver on. And it's okay to do some free work. Like it's going to happen. It's okay. It's a partnership. But I think it's also okay to go back to that client when you're doing too much free work and not having an understanding of what should be a project and what shouldn't.
Yeah.
And there's a fine line that you have to walk there. And I think that's where a lot of them get stuck. And they get afraid to go to that client and say, look, I'm not making money on you. Or they get afraid to go to the client and say, look, you're going to do it my way. You're going to use multi-factor authentication. Because if you get hacked, you're going
It
to blame
takes
me.
30 extra seconds. No.
Yes. You will get that pushback. But in the reality is like, and I think taking security awareness training serious and taking the reports. And one thing that we do is we like to get embedded with our client's HR department. And they should be taking that just as critical as sexual harassment training. And if they're not, like, it's a problem. And it takes time to get the client to evolve to that. But I think it's that repeat message over and over and over again, and helping them understand what those outcomes look like. Look, I don't really like fear mongering and like going in and you'll hear a lot of people say, oh, you scare them. I don't like that. I think they have to be prepared to take on the expense. They have to be prepared to understand. So I think it's more about educating your client, helping them understand, and the monthly recurring revenue will follow behind. I'll never forget, we had a vendor tell us, why don't you give them the service, show them the reporting that comes out of it, and then add it on to their bill and their renewal. And a lot of them look at that like, oh, I'm going to add this product or service that's going to cost $3 an endpoint, and I'm going to rack up these bills, but it's a give-take relationship. And I think using that to educate the client is what's beneficial. And why would you make it, a lot of them make it an add-on, like, oh, you got to add on?
Right.
Like, no.
It's just part of the relationship.
It's necessary because it's the right thing, right? And I think that's where a lot of MSPs are just afraid to challenge their client. And there's a good book out there called The Challenger Sale. It's probably one of the best sales books I've ever read, but it's about educating and challenging your prospect. And if you're not educating and challenging your client base, that's a big difference too.
Yeah.
You know?
You don't have a relationship.
No.
Yeah.
Well, we had to learn the hard way, and we had built up all this MRR over the term, and we were sitting at about 800,000, 900,000 in MRR. We didn't have a true client success team.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't know what that meant. Like, we're trying to figure that out.
When did you make your first hire for client success?
A year and a half ago?
Because you've got 4 now.
Yes.
Yeah, a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
4 and a director.
Yeah.
So a year and a half ago, and making that investment was a big hit to payroll and a non-revenue generating employee because it's about the relationship. But I will tell you, I think that's where a lot of MSPs are making a mistake today is they don't want to make, if I could go back, I would have done that at $5 million in revenue and had a true account management team that was maintaining the base and working that relationship and ensuring they're the voice between In-Telecom and the client, and they're working for the client essentially, you know, and which causes other problems because then they're challenging service, and it becomes a very interesting dynamic in your business. But it's worked exceptionally well.
Well, maybe it shows you internally too where to get some work done.
Yes.
You know, if something's not working for the client, then those are good eyes to have.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like let's not put our head in the sand, and let's recognize where we need to make improvements, and let's evolve because it's all about evolving consistently. And I think that's where one thing that we've done exceptionally well is we've made sure as we've continued to grow on the revenue side, we've continued to grow and evolve on our staffing side and understanding what that looks like and figuring that out. And it's that accountability chart is ever evolving, and it's a moving target constantly, and it's shifting, and it's hard, you know. But those steps through the revenue, and I think that's where what I've learned is when you can really define how much revenue equates to a new staff member is when you really start striving, because we're in a labor-intensive business. I never forget when Frank told us that years ago. You know, if you're in a labor-intensive business, it is challenging because as your revenue grows, your expenses grow. Yeah, right? It's like cutting grass.
Yeah.
The more grass I sell cutting, the more people I got to hire to go cut the grass. And it's the same concept here. Now, I do think you have some economies of scale and some efficiencies, but I think that comes over time. And you can, again, overburden your staff and figuring out how much revenue equates to a new staff member. And I think that once you figure that out and you keep hiring and you keep chipping away at that, like that's where you'll really see some growth.
So with all of this growth and all of the expansion in the community, how do you keep your staff motivated? How do you keep the culture? How do you like you guys have the energy, obviously. How does it translate to your team?
Man, culture is a tough one. You know, I think that at the end of the day, you know, like we said before, every decision we make for the team that's here. I think that, you know, as you grow, you hear a lot of people say, you can't go talk to the staff. You got to be the CEO. You got to be the COO. You got to be the owner. Keep yourself distant. You can't do those things for them, right? But I think that when you're a company of our size and as you're growing, the more involved the staff sees you, right? Like my team will say, man, you're in the trenches. That doesn't mean I'm in the trenches doing the work, right? I'm in the trenches curious about the work they're doing and let them know they have my support if they need anything. We just recently had a tornado come through here. Staff was working, took part of the roof off, right? Staff's still working, everything's good. We're committed to taking care of our clients, right? Everything's safe, right? Nobody's in danger. Committed to taking care of our clients. But small things like going out and buying food for all of them, going out and buying things for them. They didn't ask for it. To just share that little bit of appreciation. I think that the continuous appreciation that we show for the staff, that, you know, sometimes we care more about them being successful than I think they care. We're pushing them. We know they can be better. We're having those hard conversations. We're telling them, man, you can be more than this. I've seen it. I've seen the times where I've seen that next level manager in you, right? I'm not seeing that today, but I've seen it before, and continue to push us. And people, if you're going to be in a growth-oriented company, you have to want to be pushed. If you do not want to be pushed, a growth-oriented company is not a good place for it, because we're constantly being pushed by our clients.
Yeah, you got to be transparent with your employees too, that it's going to be extremely difficult. You know, one of our main core values is endurance, and we're very transparent at the very beginning of hiring everyone that this is fast growth. There's going to be a lot of change happening. It's not going to be status quo. It's going to be hard. If you want easy, kosher, day-to-day, like, this isn't the place for you.
No.
Yeah.
And I think you have to learn and set that expectation up front, because you don't want to paint this picture of something to someone and then them get something else out of it. And that's not fair to them. And I think leading from the front, and I think that's been the major difference here is, like I said, it's never been a lifestyle business for Jimmy and I, and it could easily be that today. We could easily go back and just put 7 figures in my checking account every month or every year and be okay. But it's about doing it for them. You know, I think that's why Jimmy and I haven't even taken a transaction at this point, is we feel we owe more to the staff that's here dedicated and that's been putting their head down every day. And I've always been in fear, like, how would they feel if we just went and sold this thing and then me and Jimmy are taking millions of dollars off the table and they're just here working, you know? So we feel we owe them. We've done this together, you know. We've created a profit sharing deal where we do profit sharing with all of our staff members. So based on the profitability of the company, we're very transparent with our financials. So we show all of our employees the P&L. They can see our financials, where we don't have personal things coming out of the company. We make sure we keep it. We treat it, again,
It's a business.
it's ours together with them. You know, and I think that makes a major difference. I've met a lot of MSP owners that don't want to share their financials with their staff, but then yet they want to hold their staff accountable to growth. Yeah. And I just
It's like an oxymoron.
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. If you're not sharing that and being transparent about it, that's going to be extremely difficult. And I think that's where we got very vested early in that, and just made sure that we want them to know, like, what's going on, where are we at in the year towards our goal, and it motivates them. Like, it motivates people. You feel like you're part of something. It's exciting. It's fun, you know. And again, it's hard for me because I don't know any different. I've been doing this since I was 25 years old, you know. So there's really it's the only thing I've ever done. I mean, I had a job, I guess, before in corporate, you know, America and Verizon doing sales, but I mean, I was so young. I just graduated college and really getting my life together, and then I started this and don't know any difference.
Yeah, I think it goes back to hiring culture first, teaching skill after, right? So, like, at one point we were so focused on skill that, like, we would do whatever possible to get the skill in. But what we found is that when we were taking people that didn't mesh into what we were doing, like, it started messing up what we were trying to accomplish. So now we look for culture, we look for values, we look for the people that want to be in a growing organization, the people that want more for their careers, the people that want to grow, or even some of the ones that are, you know, they're looking to be something more than they are today, just haven't been given the opportunity. So I think we hire a lot on culture first. That's our first level of screening, is like, are you going to fit in here, right? Are you going to fit in with Shawn and Jimmy, these two lunatic owners sometimes? Like, are you going to fit in with that, right? Because some people, that's not the place for them. They don't want to be in that. They want to come in and do their job. They want to be in a very mellow environment, do it and go home, you know. But it's different here, you know. It's just like our clients. We say all the time, when we find a client that wants a deep, long-term relationship and they trust what we do, they use it as an advisor, like, man, we do really well with those clients. When a client treats us like corporate America and we're just a vendor for them, we just do work for them, it doesn't last long for us, because it's just not a good fit for us. It's like oil and vinegar. I think it's the same with the staff. We find the individuals that we feel fit in, that actually, like, want to do, they buy into the cause, they buy into what we're wanting to do. Like, they come here not just for the job, they're like, man, I want to be part of, like, building this. Like, I want to be part of in 2030, I want to be in the room or be on the video, because we're going to be in multiple rooms in multiple states. And I want to hear us say, I want to see the ticker up there that says we hit 3,500 clients in the South region, right? They can feel that, they can taste that, they want that, you know? So I think that's a huge part of what we're doing too, is we're hiring them that want that right out the gate. I mean, I had a sales rep.
Yes.
We just hired the kid. He came off to there, and he's like, man, I freaking love this company. I've been living here my whole life in this company. I feel like I've been missing out my whole life. I love this company.
You got to almost build that cult-like environment where people are so bought into this that they want to do more and they want to see it thrive and grow. And again, I think sharing the financials and sharing the good and the bad. Are we doing good? Are we doing bad? So many people are afraid to be transparent about what's really going on, and it's not a bad thing. And you can't, when you get to a certain size, you can't fix that alone.
No.
Like we couldn't do this today without the staff and the team members we have. Like there's no way. No. It's impossible. We need them to be better leaders and making those investments in your staff. We have Jimmy's coach comes in, is it once a month or once a quarter? And does middle management training. And that's where it gets really difficult is you got to make investments in your people. And if you're not making investments in your people and really getting them the education and the training, especially in this space, it changes so much. And so many people don't want to make those investments in their staff. And I think that's a major issue.
I think that where a lot of MSPs struggle is they have someone who's not a fit. And maybe they hold on to them too long because of some feeling of obligation or something. Can you think of an example, or like, what was that first firing of someone? Disney says people might need to find their happiness elsewhere.
Yes.
And I love that.
You graduate them to their next opportunity. And it's not always a fit. And I think we as owners get emotionally attached to people, especially myself. Like you love people, and you go through ebbs and flows in business. And the people that got you to where you maybe were trying to go, or maybe not the right people to bring you to the next level. And that's very difficult and a big challenge that sometimes is not only necessarily firing people, but moving people around and hiring above them when they've been here longer is a challenge. I think that's harder than firing. At least for me, it's been like, look, if you're not a fit, there was a young lady that worked here. We were going through some phases in culture that culture was rough. It just got dark and gloomy for a little while. We were so focused on growth, and it was just all these things happening, and she was just like fighting it nonstop, and she had been here a long time, and it just wasn't a good fit. Every day, you could just tell. And one day, her manager didn't want to cut her. She had been here longer than her manager, and I pulled her aside and just said, look, this isn't working. It's not good for you. It's not good for me. What do we do? And how do we move on? And I'm sorry, but it's just not a good fit. And I think a lot of businesses get so afraid to let people go. And you just got to do it.
When it's the right thing to do all the way around.
And 9 times out of 10, it's better for them.
Yeah.
And when you look at what ends up happening to them, I'm still friends with her, and I've seen her thrive in her career and what she does today. And she served her purpose here for a good 5 to 6 years, and then it was done, and it was time to move on, and that's okay. And I think that's a reality, and I think it's a big challenge. And it never feels good to let someone go, ever. But I've learned that you have to give everyone an opportunity. Like Jimmy said, it's not always a fit in our I guess our culture, and culture changes too. Yeah. And I think that is a reality. And I think you have to be willing. Sometimes you have people that are really good at their job, but they're very bad for the environment, and they create another cancer, which is worse than being bad at your job. 'Cause that's easy to do. It's really hard when you got a really good one and you're cutting them loose.
And they affect the team.
And they're affecting the team.
I think a lot of times you look at what is the immediate impact if I don't have this person, right? And we live in fear of like, if I don't have that person, who's going to do this? How's my clients going to react? But at the end of the day, I think a lot of times just asking the question to the individual of like, how do you think this is going, right? And let them talk and then listen and then just ask more questions. Most of the time, if you've done a good job of communicating somewhat, they know and they feel the same way, right? I think it's just having an open conversation of like, all right, we're here, you're unhappy, we're unhappy. What do we do to move this forward? Is there anything we can do to move this forward? And let them talk. Let them tell you what's going on. And if there's a way to move it forward, that's where Shawn goes in. Well, what's that opportunity look like? Let's lay that opportunity out. And these are going to be the guardrails behind that opportunity of, hey, if you can do these things in this amount of time, we're going to meet this frequency, then hey, this will work. But if you're not going to commit and do those things, and I'm going to commit too, because there's things I have to commit to as a manager or as your manager to get you there too. I'm agreeing to commit. If you agree to commit, then we'll go down this road together. But if you're not agreeing to commit, then at the end of the day, then we're just wasting both our times, you know. And like you said, most of the time when that happens, we've seen individuals leave here and thrive.
And you know, I think we all know within the first 90 days, like, there's been so many times where we've made that mistake where we're like, oh, they'll figure it out and they'll get better and they'll do this. And like, does it really? Like, you can tell.
Yeah, you know pretty quick.
And I think what Jimmy said earlier touched on is culture. Like, skill is taught. Like, your work ethic and your culture and your attitude every day, like, is different. You know, there's a big difference between skill and will, right?
Yeah.
And if I didn't know anything about none of this stuff, you know, and I figured it out, and I graduated high school with a 1.7, right? Mm-hmm. So it can be done. It's about, are you willing to put your head down and want to learn it?
Yeah.
And you can typically tell when people are evolving. You know, now some people evolve faster than others, but you can tell. You can see it. And I think we forget that sometimes. And I think you have to teach management that ability to see when it's good and not good. And are you willing to let a person in your department be a crab in the bucket, you know, and pull everybody else down?
Yeah.
And that's a challenge. That is, and I think it's harder to teach other people to have that thick skin and do that. And like, I never forget making a manager fire an employee for the first time. That was probably harder because they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
They get nervous. They get scared. You know, we got one right now. And it's funny. I'm just letting it be, you know, and letting him do his thing. And he has called me at least 4 or 5 times asking me, what are your thoughts about this? I said, you got to make the decision.
Your department.
It's your department.
Yep.
You know, is it a benefit or is it not a benefit? And I think the faster you can do that as an owner and stay away from it and let them make their decisions and focus on the results and the outcomes of what you're looking for in your business, is the faster you'll grow. Because that's where I think I made a lot of mistakes in the beginning stages, was trying to hang on to all these different things.
So you're empowering your managers to manage their teams.
And if you want to keep them. And that's, I will tell you, as an owner, that is one of the hardest things for me, is knowing that you have this person that they're not performing, they're not doing their job, and it's just it is hard to just ignore it, you know. But I will say this: as you grow, I don't care, you're gonna have them in your organization. Mm-hmm. They're gonna exist, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And if you just focus on the big picture and look forward. You know, now there's a time and a place where you have to step in, right? Obviously, if it's damaging to the organization in a different way, you know, we've had that too. Mm-hmm. So I think it's you have to trust, you know, you have to understand what's going on. You have to be okay that it's not going to be 100%. You know, you have to be okay with 80%. And I think that's where a lot of MSPs mess up, is because they want it. I get it. I'm guilty of it too. You want it to be perfect, and you want your reputation to be great, and you want your CSAT to be all 5 stars, and it just, is it going to be? Is that real? You know, is that scalable? You know, no. You're going to have mistakes. You're going to mess up. You know, I tell our clients all the time, we're going to mess up. You know, my kids mess up all the time. That doesn't mean I'm putting them up for adoption.
Well, no,
There's days I want to. There's days that I've wanted to, right? But at the same time, I think it's about a relationship. Yep. And if you're open and honest with each other, and you have that open line of communication across it, and you're very respectful of that, that's the difference. Like I said, 9 times out of 10, it's better for the person. It's not. It is oil and water sometimes.
even if they can't see it at the time.
Yeah, that's not fair to them. That's not fair to them. And it doesn't feel good to go to work every day and not be good at what you're doing. It does not. We all know that. You want to be the one that's thriving in your career and what you're doing. And life's short, you know, and your career's
I
short.
think as we get older, it gets shorter.
It does. It is.
Longer.
But why?
Let a lot of stuff go.
But why? Why stay working for someone that you're just not happy? Why? I never understood that. You know, if you're just really not happy, now look, is there days where I come to work and I don't want to be here? Absolutely, right? But at the same time, like I know that I have an option. I don't have to be here. You know, I tell everybody every day, you don't have to come here.
No, we get to come.
This isn't prison. You're allowed to come here. And if you don't like it, you know, Gary Vee says all the time, if you don't like your job, quit. And it's true, quit.
Yeah, Jimmy, you just made a comment.
Yeah, we get. Yeah, I tell my staff all the time, and I'm like, we get to help these clients today.
You don't have to.
We don't have to. We get to help them today, right? I think we got to have that mentality of like, for me too, like, I get to come to work every day. Like I could work from home. I don't have to come here. I could come to work at 8:30 if I wanted, but I don't. I could leave at 5 o'clock if I want to, but I don't, right? I get to do those things, and I enjoy those things. You know, my wife thinks I'm crazy sometimes, right? Because it's like I can't get enough of it. It's like an addiction, you know. But at the end of the day, we preach all the time. Like we get to do all these things. Like there's a lot of people out there that are wishing, dreaming, and praying that they got to do the things that we get to do every day. You know, so I think there's some appreciation, behind it. If you look about where you came from and where you're going, but also look at like where we are and the things we get to do versus all the people that are dreaming of being able to have the opportunity to do these things. You know,
I remember looking at other MSPs in the market that. We would look at and get excited to say, man, it would be awesome if like we were that size. Like we're in the process of an acquisition right now that we're buying a company that Jimmy and I looked up to these guys years ago. I remember going to the advisory council and being like, wow, man, it'd be awesome to be them, and we're buying them, which is humbling, right? It's very, it's a good reflection on where you were and where you can go. And I think everybody has the same opportunity. I think every MSP, there's so much opportunity in the market right now in this space. And if you're willing to go out there and just get after it every single day, I don't know, you just got to do it.
So Shawn, I'll start with you. If you could start an MSP today, is there anything you do differently? Where would you start?
I don't know if I would do anything differently because like I said earlier in the conversation, I think that that growth and the failing and making the mistakes and learning creates a lot of ability to take it on over time. I think some of the things that I would do differently is I would have my packaging structured and knowing what I'm going to deliver and what those outcomes are from that package. I would definitely implement KPIs and metrics earlier in to have a better understanding of what I'm doing. I'd be setting goals more often than what I did in the very beginning stages. There was really no goal setting. It was kind of like, all right, well, let's do more, and it just kind of just happened. I think I'd be setting those quarterly goals and staying pretty consistent on those quarterly goals and ensuring that we're hitting them. So I think those things there are probably the key components of what works. I wouldn't get so caught up in how to structure the package. I think we did that for a while. Like we got so caught up on like, what should it include and what should it include? And I don't know. I think there's 85 different ways to skin that cat. And I think that you just got to pick one and just run with it and just let it rip. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't over-engineer it.
You can always change it.
Yes.
Always change it. Yeah.
and just, I think, there's not much I would change because again, I love what we've done and I get excited every single day. I think I could do it faster, right? By setting the goals, right? Making the right strategic hires, not pulling the reins when I should have just let it flourish, and you get scared and you pull back and you don't invest enough. And I think so many MSPs start growing and they think their way to go grow is through acquisition, and then they go acquire and they acquire. Acquiring's harder than organic growth, because you got to integrate that thing, and then you also got to be able to show you're paying a multiple on something that you have to also be able to grow. So if you don't have that organic engine that knows how to grow, and that doesn't grow, then what? So I think that's where a lot of the mistakes were made. I think I've probably done some acquisitions earlier than what I've done at this point. But also look at, on the other hand, I look at all the organic growth that we've done over the last 3 years. Would that have broken the company too? With a lot of organic growth and that happening at the same time? Were we mature enough for that? I don't know. You can't ever go back, but I think that's where a lot of them make mistakes. Is I think that you got to find the organic ability to grow, because nothing beats that.
Yeah.
And not 5% organic growth, like 20% should be the mark. And they say that's the bar, like that's stellar, and the space is 20%. But last year we grew 66%. So I don't know.
What bar?
Yeah, what bar, right? Set the bar. Be the bar.
Be the bar.
Be
Be
the
the
bar.
bar. You know, but do I think I have regrets on that? I don't know. You know, some days.
You remind me of a coach that they say when the coach stops yelling at you, that's when you should worry.
Yes.
Yeah.
I talk about that here.
Because they don't believe in
If I
it.
don't talk to you, that you should be nervous. You know, maybe some of the time that I've missed with my family with doing this, but I also look at you have options in life, and I think everybody gets to the end of the road and they wonder, like, could I have spent more time with my family, or could I have taken my shot? And I think the one thing that I can honestly tell my kids is that I've taken my shot every time. And I've never been afraid to do that. And yes, there's sacrifices that come into play to take that shot. But would I get to the end of the road and say, man, I've met so many people up in age and say, yeah, I wish I would have took that leap of faith and this and that. So I think it goes both ways, you know. So are there regrets there some days? Sure. Have I had to miss things? Absolutely. But I also look at the satisfaction that I've been able to show my children on what's possible and what they can do with their life, you know. So I don't know.
Jimmy, what about you? Anything?
I mean, I have to agree. I mean, I don't think I would change anything. I think that the reason the company is what it is today is because of the journey and the way, like I tell everybody, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up, you know? And like, I couldn't imagine growing up any differently than what I have through this journey, because I don't know if just mentally, physically, emotionally, if I would be the same person or have the same values, the same commitment if I did it any other way. Now, what would I do a little bit smarter, right? I would definitely invest in management sooner. I think that, you know, for a long time, you know, Shawn and I tried to hang on to doing everything or just giving people pieces of things. It's much easier to train when it's this big than when it's this big, right? Because when it's smaller, things are more tangible, you can grab them, you have your hands around them. And I think that's why a lot of times you feel like you don't need someone, is because it's more manageable for you. But that's the time when, if you do want to grow, like you should, when it's manageable for you, bring someone else in that you can see, that you can spend the time and the energy and get them trained. Because when it becomes unmanageable, right, you're trying to manage this beast that's growing, you're trying to train staff. And we tell people all the time, this is a moving. You ever been to like an Amtrak station? Most people haven't, right? But like Amtrak pulls up, they stop, they toot the horn, the conductor gets off, everybody quietly gets on. You know, when you're trying to train a manager in a fast growing company and you do it too late, Amtrak's coming, we're not stopping, they swipe the door open, they're like, throw me your luggage and jump on, you know, and that's how, you know, we've trained a lot of our managers. So if I could go back and do that in a more manageable, controlled state, I would have made them investments a lot sooner, because I feel like as an organization, I feel like we would be farther as an organization because Shawn and I would be doing different things than we are today, right? We may be at that next level that we're trying to get to, that we're striving to get to today. So that's definitely one thing I would definitely do. You know, one of the things I feel like we waste a lot of time on is trying to perfect those processes and like trying to thinking that it's going to solve all these problems. Just recently we said, you know what? Let's go back to the KISS method. Let's keep it simple, stupid. Let's redefine these processes. Let's make them so simple that onboarding and training is simple, because they're so simple to follow that like my 10-year-old can follow them. So we've really redefined a lot of the processes and said, man, what do our clients want? What do we tell them we're going to deliver? And let's just make sure the processes define that, the results of them define that, and keep them simple, right? Like, we need a phone downstairs for a client. We don't need to assign a ticket to this person, go to this person, and touch 4 people. Like, let's go get the phone, check it out, that person put the notes on there, get it programmed, get it shipped out the door. So I think as you grow, you feel like everyone needs to do their part, and you need this process of all these different things. Man, just keep it simple. We wasted a lot of time trying to build something that I don't think created. Now we've kind of redefined back to, man, let's keep it really simple, because the simpler it is, the easier it is for everybody to kind of adopt it. So I would definitely do that. I would invest in the management. You know, as far as packages are concerned, I agree. You know, just put them out there. We've really simplified our packages. You know, one of the things I feel like I would probably change is, you know, we got really heavy on focusing on efficiency and profitability, right? Which are very important things. But I feel like sometimes efficiency and profitability can also be negative towards the client experience and the executables of the client. So recently we started shifting and saying, hey, let's efficiencies and profitability are important, right? But let's focus on the deliverables to the client, right? What does the client need from us to be profitable? Let's reverse engineer this. How much time can we spend with a client to be at a good spot where we feel profitable? Let's manage it proactively. And since we started doing some of those things, it took a little bit of time to work through some of the reactive things. But since we started doing that, our clients are happier, right? Profitability is still back to where it used to be. Some's getting better, but we started focusing more on the deliverables of what the client wanted and why they were doing business with us, rather than let's keep EHR to 150 or 125. Like, we got so consumed with that at one point that I think we lost our way in delivering a good client experience, and the clients could feel it. So we reshifted back on, hey, why are we doing business together? You know, why do you love doing business with us? What do you need from us as an MSP? Because they all need something different. And what we feel like you need versus what you need, they're not the same. They're two different things. One person's, they care about time and they want tickets solved and average response an hour or less. And others are like, man, I don't really care about none of that, right? I care about this, right? So they all have different needs. And I think we've done a good job recently of restructuring and like taking care of like, what does the client need from us? Why are they doing business with us? And let's deliver based on that.
And doing it one way.
Yes.
Like, we made some mistakes where we have like all these different packages, and this person was on an old package, and we didn't want to move them to the new package because the new package had more cogs associated with it. And it's like, why don't we just move everybody to one package, and then let's deliver an experience, and then let's look at our agreement probability. And if it's not profitable, let's go have the conversation with the client. Because it was kind of interesting as we moved them to the new package, some of the noise went down and they were actually still profitable. Right. So it's just, I don't know. I think
It's so funny how you both laugh when you talk about old packages.
Oh, because we
it
changed
got
it.
it got so convoluted, and we had look, it's my fault. I was so quick to just go sell all these different things. And then next thing you know, like, all these people are trying to deliver on it. Right. And it's interesting. I was talking to somebody recently, and they were telling me how, like, yeah, we're going to bring on this product set and start doing this too. And I was like, don't do that. And they're like, why? I'm like, because you have to manage it. And when you start taking lots of people and trying to get them to manage all these different things, it breaks. So don't be afraid. I think one thing I would do differently too is I would go back and not be afraid to go ahead and let clients go that weren't a good fit. Instead of saying,
just like employees.
Yes.
Revenue,
Instead of saying, oh, I got to hang on this revenue, like, it's okay to walk up and say, hey, look, this isn't working. It's not working for you. It's not working for me. Like, let's part ways and let it go. Let the revenue go. Like, screw the contract. Let's move on, and let's work with a client that the relationship's viable and it works for both parties, because it's a two-way. You know, and you got to make sure when you start having that client that grinds on your staff, it's not okay. You know, and that's where, I guess, that old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
The grease, yep.
You know, like, let that go.
Yeah.
You know, and move on. So I would definitely hire a client success team earlier. I'll tell you that. I would definitely bring that in. And I think before I develop new departments, I would bring in leadership first. Yeah. One mistake we've made in the past is me and Jimmy were like, oh, we could be the leader for that new department, and let's bring in the staff, and then it adds more into our plate, and just we suffer. Yeah. Bring on the leader first, and let the leader build their team.
Bring on the expert.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And give them very narrowed focus. Yeah. Very narrow. And keep narrowing it. Like, as you scale, continuously narrow that focus nonstop. You know, and I think that's where a lot of MSPs fail, is they're like, oh, Bob's a Swiss Army knife and he can do network and server and all these things. And next thing you know,
how many networks? How many servers?
Yes. Right. And then they're buried. Yeah. You know, we've made that mistake, you know, and I think that's where you have to be willing to segment, you know, and start making those investments in your staff and giving them breathing room, giving them some downtime. Yeah. Because in our space, it's not much.
Yeah. What is that, Stephen Covey? Got to stop and sharpen your saw.
Yes.
Or you can keep using a dull saw and get nowhere, but keep trying.
Yes. And you won't get anywhere.
Right.
Yep. You know, so that's definitely some of the things I know that we would do differently.
I don't have any regret in what I've done. I think there's times where, you know, day to day, I'm like, man, did I make the right decision? Man, why am I continuing to do this? Like, hey, you don't have to do this. You know, why do you care so much? But you know, I think overall, I don't regret anything that I've done. You know, I think that, you know, time with family, sometimes you regret that. Sometimes you regret I had a guy one time that worked for me, and I regretted not having that difficult conversation sooner, right? And he was a good employee, and he walked out the door, right? Now I got him back about 6 months later, right? But I told myself, I said, man, I will never allow that to happen again. When I see burnout or I see someone in that state, right? I'm not going to ignore it. I'm going to hit it head on, and like, I made that commitment to myself, and I share that because the guy that's here is a very tenured employee that loves to tell the story about the grass not always being greener on the other side. And we tell everybody he took a sabbatical, right? He didn't leave. He took a sabbatical. But we tell that story a lot to the staff of, it isn't always greener. So there's regret like that I have that, hey, I got lucky that time, that I had a guy that was in the wrong position, right guy, wrong seat, now doing very well in his new role and has actually moved up in his role from when he came back on board. So there's regret of things like that. There's regret of, good employees leaving. Like, what could I have done differently? Is there anything I could have done differently? I had a guy one time who was a great engineer and he found his dream job. He'd been trying to get it forever. And like in my mind, I'm like, what did I do wrong? Like, I had regret. But then, he would come to us and he came to me and Shawn both. And he said, man, I just want y'all to know, like, this is my dream job. And like, I would have never been able to apply for this job or even be qualified for it if it wasn't for the things I learned here. Right. So like sometimes those days of regret, it's like, all right, now I'm excited. Right. Now I'm happy for him. Like we still talk to him. I think my regret more is day-to-day regret of just things that I question if, I made the right decision or if I did the right thing or, hey, we're buying this company and like there's days I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, are we really doing this again? Like, we're at a good spot. We're growing. We've been growing, and we're taking that next leap of faith. And then there's that evening. I'm like, man, I can't wait. Like I'm excited. I'm energized. So I think I don't regret anything. I regret, as decisions sometimes that I make, but I don't think there's anything major that I really could say looking back on the last 15 years where I'm like, man, I regret doing that. I wish I would have done that totally different.
I think just like from an outsider's view, looking at everything you've told me, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. And you made the best decision you could at the time. And I think that's what a lot of MSPs go through. Yeah. Is that you make the best.
You learn from, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to do the wrong thing and you learn from it and move on. It's can't beat yourself up, and you're going to hire the wrong person. You're going to fire the wrong person. You're going to hire the wrong client. You're going to fire the wrong client. I mean, there's so many things you're going to do. And I think it's understanding and learning from that and just moving forward, and I think that's, can't get hung up on it. I never got hung up on all that. Yeah.
Yeah, we got hung up on bad decisions or regret. We'd still be
Wouldn't
Jimmy and Shawn.
No,
Still
we
be
wouldn't be
Jimmy
where
and
we are
Shawn.
today.
Yeah,
It'd still just be him and I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that goes for the staff too. I mean, we have team members here where like they're not the best tech. They make the most mistakes, but the clients love them, right?
Customer experience.
They love it because of the experience.
That's what it's all about.
They're like, I don't care if he messes up. I want him. I want him to come here. I love him.
That's the difference maker in the business is that client experience.
It really is.
We don't have anything proprietary. We didn't make a cool widget. All we can do is service the client and try to do the best we can.
Yep.
I was going to ask you where you see In-Telecom in 5 years, but with the rate of change in technology, where do you see In-Telecom in 2 years?
I think we'll be a $50 million MSP. If you look at last year, we finished a year right over 20 million, close to 21. This year, organically, we're on pace for 24 million with some growth. And then we're in the process of an acquisition of a $12 million organization. Yep. So it's going to put us at about 36 million. We're in some conversations with some other acquisitions to go show that we can buy and integrate and bring them all in. So I would think in 2 years we'll be at 50 million. Mm-hmm. That's the plan.
Yep.
So a nice bottle of champagne.
Yes. It'd be exciting. It'd be exciting to see, to watch it grow into other markets. We thought we could only sell in our current market, and we've recently been bringing on clients in California and other states, Oregon, which is cool to see us grabbing market share in other markets, and we don't even have bodies on the ground. Mm-hmm. So I think that's about evolving your managed service practice and having the right expectations that it is a remote-only contract, and that's okay. If you look at a lot of the nationals, that's what they do, and they utilize boots on the ground, and that's something that we've been able to do exceptionally well is to network and have resources in other markets, and then you're able to give other MSPs work to do, and it helps them. and that's a good way to open up a door for an acquisition.
Well, all I can say is I can't wait to see what the next 2 years
Me too.
holds.
I'm excited.
Thanks for watching our first episode of Manage to Succeed. Please like and subscribe and follow us and come back for more because we're just that fun.